Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's special Fireside Chat in recognition of Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. I'm Amna Hussein, the Community Outreach and Engagement Manager at the Masonic Cancer Center at the University of Minnesota, your host and moderator for our Fireside Chats each month. I'm grateful today to be here with you for a conversation that touches so many lives. Prostate cancer is the second most commonly diagnosed cancer in men and affects 1 in 8 men over their lifetime. But behind every number, there is a person, a family, and a community that is impacted by this disease. The Fireside Chats are a way that the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement at the Masonic Cancer Center bridges the gap between science and community. And so our mission is to reduce the burden of cancer by actively engaging communities and providing access to knowledge on the latest in cancer research, prevention strategies, the importance of early detection and screening, treatment options, survivorship, and opportunities for clinical research. So as I mentioned, today's conversation will focus on prostate cancer. We're going to be connecting research with real life. So you'll hear how scientists at the University of Minnesota are uncovering new genetic clues to better treat prostate cancer. And then you'll hear from somebody who's walked this path firsthand and now uses his story to help others find strength, support, and hope. And finally, before we get started, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Johnson and Johnson for their generous support of today's Fireside Chat. Their commitment to community-centered cancer education helps make conversations like today possible. And so now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We'll first be hearing from Dr. Justin Hwang. Dr. Hwang is an assistant professor of medicine at the University of Minnesota and is a cancer researcher who focuses on how genes influence the way prostate cancer grows and responds to treatment. Dr. Hwang received his undergraduate degree in chemical engineering from Carnegie Mellon University and earned his PhD in biochemistry, studying critical regulators of gene differentiation and tumor development. He completed his postdoctoral training at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, where he developed powerful gene scale tools to identify treatment targets in lethal cancers like metastatic prostate and breast cancers. At the University of Minnesota, Dr. Hwang now leads a lab that's using high throughput screening and informatics to identify genes that drive aggressive cancer behavior. His work gives us hope for more personalized, precise, and effective treatment options for prostate cancer in the future. And so we are so honored to have such a leading expert in the field here with us today to share more about the research that's happening at the University of Minnesota. And following Dr. Hwang's presentation, we'll hear about the remarkable journey of prostate cancer survivor Billy Brownlee. I'll introduce Billy a little later on in our program today. And before we dive in, I have just a few quick housekeeping items to cover. So today's Fireside Chat is recorded and will be made available on the Masonic Cancer's YouTube page by next week. For University of Minnesota employees and spouses participating in the university's Employee Wellbeing Program, you can email the Wellbeing Program at wellness@umn.edu to claim your 200 Wellbeing points for attending today's Fireside Chat. And lastly, we invite you to engage with us. So please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit any questions, reactions, comments that you have throughout the session today. We have plenty of time carved out at the end to take some questions. And all right, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over the virtual floor to Dr. Hwang.
Hey, well, thank you for that kind introduction, and I'm very happy to be here interfacing with a group of individuals that have a strong interest in prostate cancer. And I would first of all like to just indicate that, as we know, there's a lot of cancer research going on at the University of Minnesota. really importantly, I think there's a huge group of researchers at the University of Minnesota that really deeply care about prostate cancer research. And there's so many things that we're doing that are so innovative and exciting here. Unfortunately, I'm unable to highlight every single opportunity and sort of research effort here, so I'm not doing everybody justice. I'll try to highlight a few efforts that I think the University of Minnesota is very special with. Um, so that's it. Here's some of my disclosures. I'm just going to point out I do work with a couple of diagnostic companies, which is to some degree the message I like to deliver today. As to start off with, I like to talk about what is cancer diagnostics in 2025. Diagnostic as in we can actually survey a patient's tumor by looking at their genome. There's about 20,000 genes in the genome. We look to see if every one of them is genetically perturbed using a modern day test, which is often covered by insurance these days. I'm going to highlight some efforts that we can utilize to really think about one single patient at the University of Minnesota and really expand to understand this in a much larger patient population across the United States. Then finally, I'll highlight a project that really indicates as a very novel therapeutic that's uniquely developed at the University of Minnesota based on our research and development. So with that said, a lot of us, we've talked about this. Prostate cancer is still one of the leading causes for men, cancer-specific deaths in men. There's about 35,000 deaths per year. The disease is really breaking apart into several stages. In a localized disease, you have some initial disease that progresses, and then finally a stage where we see it as very treatment refractory. A lot of these patients don't no longer respond to the existing treatments. And I just kind of highlight the type of research and interest in each of these areas. Here in this localized disease setting, we might be looking at a patient in a urology clinic. Here we're thinking about options as, for example, surgery, radiation to try to remove the prostate cancer. But within that population, a very small subset come back with a more aggressive tumor. So therefore, it's really of interest to study who actually comes back with those aggressive tumors after their initial diagnosis. Not all of them, only a small fraction, about 10%, will come back with disease. Then finally, at the late stage setting, this is where a lot of the genetics and genomics play a big role because this allows us to understand which genes could be actually therapeutic targets, that we could develop new therapies against. I'll highlight one specific example using data from our own institute and also utilizing a national sort of data portal. With that said, what are genomic testing? I kind of highlight this captures genes from patients. Really, we can take a tumor biopsy, and some of us are more interested in, for example, taking blood-based biopsies. All these sort of biopsies, what is the purpose of this? This gets sent to a company. Really, at the end of the day, this tells us the type of genomic alterations that are different in this particular tumor as compared to a normal cell. This allows us to act upon for specific lesions in the tumor to hopefully devise a targeted therapy to really that is particularly effective against the tumor. As we know, perhaps not surprising, really every patient has slightly different genomics. Really, the tumor evolves differently. So this allows us to really think about targeted therapy in a very patient-specific manner, personalized medicine, if you will. Long story short, all these approaches really allow us to think about individual patients as they come to our clinic. So really, a reason that we want to study our patients and really studying their genomics, this effort has started a while back. Really, University of Minnesota is exposed to the patient population from Minnesota, not surprisingly. Minnesota, the Masonic Cancer Center, 70% of our patient population are from local people that live around this area. So with that said, we can see that the incident rates of prostate cancer is slightly higher than across from the United States. So how do we address this? So long story short, I'm going to highlight, I'm not going to make things over. I'll try to explain this in very layman's terms, despite the slides having a lot of data on here. But really, throughout a couple companies, what I'm trying to highlight is that we're very focused on prostate cancer as one of the diseases in this cancer center. Every year, we do more and more diagnostic genomic testing. And one of the big arms is looking into prostate cancer, which really falls in this GU umbrella. Even using liquid biopsy testing, which is very non-invasive, we can collect from the patient's blood. We're starting this process too. You see that there's 40 patients that we collected genomic data from their blood already. And all of this is housed within the cancer center, which allows us to make observations, but some of them very unique, that allows us to really think about new and big things and ideas. It gives the researchers a real ground truth to think about how should we study our patients and develop novel therapeutics, starting from the patient population that would visit our cancer center. This is just an observation, an increase in these sort of big databases. So there's a lot of terms being thrown around. One of them would be a clinical genomic database. What is this? You might have heard of this or not. These are sort of databases now shared across cancer centers. For example, the University of Minnesota partakes in this Precision Oncology Alliance. It's an alliance across 100 cancer centers, was they deposit all the genetic data from their patients into a big database. This is a little bit outdated. Right now, for example, even a year ago, we're looking at 250,000 patients. Within this are many prostate cancer patients and non-prostate cancer patients. What does this information allow us to do? It really allows us to determine who has specific genomic alterations, how unique is this, what to devise as a novel therapy, or how do we think about our patient population compared to the rest of the United States across these 100 cancer centers. Now, there is a little bit of a unique problem. This is where my job comes in that we have for every single patient, there's about 1 million data points. This is why researchers like myself are necessary. We help really digest this information, all this genomic data, so we can help the clinicians that really are interfacing with the patient, or the clinical trialists are designing new trials to help us devise new therapeutics. So this is where my lab comes in. I love this set of pictures on the right side. Here's my wife, and you can see that this is Dr. Ryan, a clinical trialist, Emmanuel Tarak is oncologist / clinical trialist, Zorko here, also a clinical trialist, and has a laboratory. We're all sitting together. This is our friends in the diagnostic company. Important, this is our lab. So there's a cycle of life here. Once we get the diagnostic testing data, there's a strong team of scientists downstream of that. We try to think about how all this data fits into a very big patient population, and then hopefully utilize our unique algorithms. A lot of them are computational, relate to machine learning. And at the end of the day, this allows us to proceed and, for example, hopefully finding new targets for the community, for the patients, and for the clinicians alike. Now, I'm going to share a story. I think this is a very unique story. This story started about 4 years ago, in which Dr. Ryan, who was a mentor of mine, he's a phase 3 clinical trialist. He also sees prostate cancer patients himself. One day he told me that there was a specific University of Minnesota patient that somehow had a very unique event, genomic aberration. And this patient unfortunately did not do well. For those of you that know someone with prostate cancer, specific antigen PSA is somewhat of a surrogate measurement for a patient's tumor trajectory as the tumor is progressing or getting better. Well, that said, this patient, unfortunately died, but we really wanted to figure out what this mutation meant. The big reason is this, because BRAF, being a gene, is already druggable in other cancers. And we had never discussed this gene in prostate cancer patients. So utilizing this example, we really started thinking, are there other patients that have these genomic aberrations that are potentially already druggable? So with that said, we partnered up with a diagnostic company, Foundation Medicine. What they do is take some of their liquid biopsies and tissue biopsies to look to see if there is BRAF alteration in an existing genomic test. We partnered with Dr. Alex Gerazi-Raffel from City Hope and Dr. Antonarakis to do this particular study. This study was eventually published in Clinical Cancer Research a couple of years ago. And it was very remarkable. We found that, albeit these mutations are not super prevalent, they do exist in about 3% of the patient population. And you can detect this either in their tissue or in blood. That means all across the United States, if we can think about 3% of the prostate cancer patients have this genomic aberration, and this stems from the observation from a single patient. So this tells us there are already drugs that may work in prostate cancer patients that we are not simply not thinking about because we haven't thoroughly thought about the genomic aberrations. With that said, we are starting a clinical trial to study this gene and really doing a lot of preclinical testing to think about potential patients that might be suitable to receive these drugs. I'll just kind of show a couple of pieces of data, and this is perhaps a little bit complex, but with that said, a lot of times a tissue biopsy can be taken from a patient's tumor that's in the prostate, in the peripheral lymph nodes, or maybe even ones that have metastasized to the bone, even brain, the liver, other regions where if the patient has such metastasis, they'll do really poorly in terms of overall outcome. That said, we are noting that no matter what kind of stage the patient is at, they seemingly always have, based on these consistent colors, a BRAF alteration. Further, we notice that this is also independent of race to some degree, albeit African Americans and Asians do have much higher prevalence in general, but these mutations are also found across European American, African Americans, and Asians. So long story short, we do think that there's a pocket of patients that may be responsive to such therapies. Now, interestingly enough, during the course of the study, what we had identified is there was a unique case study in Brazil in which a patient did somehow remarkably receive this drug and that targets BRAF, and he initially showed response. So long story short, one of our students who now went to UPenn, he's now getting his MD degree, has really looked at BRAF across all cancer types. He's finding that prostate cancer is one of the cancer types that we should look into using this particular type of drug. I'm going to summarize what we just discussed here. Really, there's some alterations that are in patients that are already druggable. Sometimes we just have to look a little bit harder. Sometimes it takes an acting physician to bring us the case to say, let's do a genomic test, genetic test to see what we can find in this particular patient. We're very interested in really thinking about this, expanding this approach across the United States in partnership with the City of Hope. But long story short, we're really devising a way to partner with the diagnostic company. In this case, we may work with Tempus to really allow us to test prostate cancer patients to identify aberrations in this particular gene. All right, I'm going to take a quick pause. I'll really do a quick transition. We have a unique clinical trial that might start at the University of Minnesota starting from 2026. And here are some of the investigators that really spearheaded this effort. And here I would also utilize some of our this is entirely developed utilizing our localized resources. Many of you may have heard of immune-related therapeutics. This is a case where we're thinking about a cell type that has not necessarily been tested in any prostate cancer setting at all. And these cell types, I'm going to give us a quick introduction, are related to natural killer cells. Now, natural killer cells are part of the innate immunity. And Dr. Zorko, Dr. Miller, who is now our cancer center director at the time, really has spent a lot of time studying natural killer cells. And without showing all the data, what they have shown to this date is that we can actually hone these natural killer cells against aberrant cells that are existent in the patient's body. In this case, we look at, for example, NK cells, and here's a chemical that we deliver to the patients that brings a natural killer cell right to the prostate cancer cell through this target called B7H3. By doing so, this leads to cell death. And because the reagent is very smartly designed, intelligently designed, it allows it to really expand the NK cells locally at the spot. So essentially, we can think about it as almost like a weapon that we can hone against a prostate tumor. It recognizes B7H3 that is robustly expressed in a prostate tumor, and then subsequently allows the natural killer cells to be proliferating at the tumor site, and then hopefully with the efficacy of killing this. So I'm going to quickly go through some research, not expansively, but really, here's an introduction of B7. Why are we excited about B7H3? Now, some of this information is a little bit outdated, but B7H3 is in fact an immune regulator. There are many instances where B7H3 on the tumor cells can suppress the local immunity. So therefore, it's preventing from the immune cells from acting on the tumor. That said, why should we be excited? In the second line here, there has been a very promising clinical trial conducted at Johns Hopkins, also led in part by Dr. Antonarakis, that showed that targeting B7H3 at this particular case led to 66% of the responses in this particular clinical trial. With that said, there's so many companies that have since started getting very excited about B7H3. This includes several reagents. I'm not going to summarize all these here, but what we will particularly focus is on this trike, which I just discussed in the last slide. The trike essentially brings the NK cell against the tumor cell. Now, this work is all done from a medical student, and I know this slide, I'm just going to kind of briefly explain this a little bit. This is a condensed data set in which we're looking at almost 90,000 patients across the United States. And what we're looking to see is what type of cancers have the highest B7H3. So think about this y-axis as a measurement of how much B7H3 there is across patients. Again, this is very condensed. Essentially, we're looking at a big sample number here, seeing prostate cancer at 3,000, and this is about 2 years ago. Essentially, what Carly demonstrated is nicely that prostate cancer have a lot of B7H3. So this gives us a lot of promise that targeting B7H3 might be hopefully optimal. And Dr. Shi, who's only going to become faculty soon at the University of Maryland, we hope, also has studied a lot in the late stage setting. So in the previous setting, we're looking at a lot of localized disease. In the late stage setting, she's finding that, again, on the y-axis compared, you can just kind of see there's more of B7H3 in metastatic tumors. I'm going to skip this part a little bit, but really think about at the single cell, we can actually look at B7H3 expression. After treatments, especially in the treatment-resistant tumors, you can see that B7H3 becomes more prevalent on top of the tumor cells, even when we examine at the single cell level. But that said, why should we get excited about natural killer cells? Dr. Zorko took a look at the same exact data set of 90,000 patients, and he found that, for example, prostate cancers have a lot of natural killer cells as well. This, again, is across 50 types of tumors. You can kind of see this is a measurement of what percent of NK cells are associated with a specific cancer. On the right side, again, we saw a similar figure before, which we look at metastasis site to the lung, liver. So long story short, even in a metastatic disease, we will see natural killer cells in the patient. Thinking about the drug again, all we need to do is bring the natural killer cells to activate them against the tumor, especially those that express B7H3. I'm going to skip through this slide a little bit. Long story short, Dr. Zorko has started testing these reagents in patients, in patient-derived cell lines. With that said, we can start seeing, and here black means death. All I'm going to do is show that here you can see without adding the drug, the tumor cells are largely alive, which is indicated in red. And on the right side, we can see adding the reagents along with NK cells started to kill these tumors. Now they're looking more dead. Here's a few markers for those NK cell researchers to show that there is more proliferation through this marker and then more killing. So hopefully this kind of explains why we're doing such therapeutics for our prostate cancer patients here. And again, I would like to emphasize this is a unique trial that is initiated from researchers all here at the University of Minnesota. You can see their affiliations here. I also like this is a shout out to Dr. Zorko, who really manages a lot of our cell therapies for prostate cancer patients. He would like to indicate that really Minnesota is a very unique site. There's not a lot of cancer centers that are willing to deliver these therapies, especially some of these immune therapy trials that are already given at the University of Minnesota. My last slide here, I'd like to thank some of the resources and also, just indicate here are some members of our prostate cancer team. Obviously, I did not do them justice by citing all their work, but the reality is they all have contributed a lot of the work that I was able to present here. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hwang, for that incredibly informative overview of the exciting and emerging research in prostate cancer. And I mean, it's so encouraging when to hear about the innovation that's being explored right here in Minnesota at the University of Minnesota that can improve prostate cancer outcomes in years to come. So thank you for that. And now it is my honor to introduce our next speaker, Billy Brownlee. So Billy Brownlee is a homeless prevention services manager with Hennepin County, where he brings more than 2 decades of experience helping individuals and families overcome barriers to build more stable and healthy lives. But Billy is also a prostate cancer survivor. His journey through diagnosis, surgery, and recovery is deeply personal, and he is extremely passionate about sharing his journey to inspire others. His lived experience navigating cancer has shaped his unwavering commitment to advocacy, equity, and community support. And you'll hear more about his story, but it's definitely one of resilience, hope, and community healing. Billy, thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful to have you here to share your story with us today. So I'm going to pass the virtual floor over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, those very kind words. My name is Billy Brownlee. I am a prostate cancer survivor. Really do love saying that. And I just want to talk to you very briefly today about something. I mean, it nearly killed me. It nearly took me out, but instead it woke me up. It was prostate cancer. Here's the hard truth about prostate cancer, and especially with African American men. African American men are 70% more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer and twice as likely to die from it compared to white men. And that's not just a statistic, it's a crisis. Therefore, it's very important for us men not only to get screened for prostate cancer, but especially African American men to be screened at an early age and to have that PSA test done. The suggestion is, I believe it's around 50 years old to have that test, but I'm pushing a narrative for 40 years old for men of color to have this particular test, because in our community it is running rampant. Just a little statistic: Black and African American men are more likely to develop prostate cancer. 1 in 6 men will develop prostate cancer in his lifetime, compared to 1 in 8 men overall. That's African American. The high risk of prostate cancer in African American males is due to a range of factors, including genetics, racial bias, and socioeconomic status. Too often in our community, we're told, as I was growing up, man up, tough it out, keep quiet. If it ain't broke, busted, or bleeding, you don't need to go to the hospital. So those were the words that I was brought up on, in the 70s, late 60s. But putting your health first is not a weakness. Early detection is not fear, it's wisdom. And checking up on yourself is not giving in, it's actually standing up. When I first got the news, yeah, I was scared. I hate to use that word, scared or fear, but I was, because my father, and he had 6 brothers, and all 6 brothers, including my father, passed away from prostate cancer. So I had an opportunity to watch them suffer in real time. Yeah, my strength, my pride, my future, it all felt like it was hanging in the balance upon receiving the news that, you have cancer. But I had a decision to make. Was I going to be afraid, or was I going to fight? I chose to fight. I'm naturally a fighter, so this was a challenge, and I chose to take up that fight. And during the process, there were tough days, sleepless nights, long prayers, step by step, test by test, surgery, recovery, support. I made it through. And now I use my voice to inform other men about getting tested, because if my story can help even one person get tested early, then every moment of this fight is worth it. So getting the PSA test, usually men, we think that they do the thing with the glove and the finger. So I try to inform them that it's a normal blood test now. So you get a blood test, and for PSA levels, and you get immediate results within a couple of days. And the PSA test is a laboratory test that measures the amount of prostate-specific antigen found in the blood. PSA is a protein made by the prostate gland. The amount of PSA may be higher in those men who actually have prostate cancer. This is why testing is important and testing is needed. And I got a scale. I think I got the scale last year, and it goes as follows. From 0 to 2.5 is normal for a man 40 to 50 years old. From 0 to 3.5 is normal for a man 50 to 60 years old. From 0 to 4.5 is normal for a man 60 to 70 years old. And from the 0 to 5.5 is normal for a man 70 to 80 years old. My PSA levels were a 5.8 when I was tested at age 54. So my levels was way up. So talk to your doctor, talk to your family, ask questions. This is very important, to ask questions, keep your family involved with it. You owe that to yourself and the people who love you. Being a man doesn't mean you have to keep it all inside. It just means stepping up. And there's nothing more courageous than taking care of yourself. As prostate cancer survivors, we battle scars, and those scars are not our weakness. They're evidence of our strength. We didn't just survive, we overcame, and now we have a job to do, to mentor, to educate, and to lift up our fellow cancer survivor brothers. I always like to encourage those that I'm sharing with to, let's reach back, let's speak up, let's lead. It's important that we lead. I believe I was truly brought to this for a reason. I used to say, why me? Why is this happening to me? But why not me? I think I'm a perfect candidate to do this. So I believe I was chosen because this is, sharing my life experiences is important to me. So I'm here to stand, and I'm here to share this inspirational message. Cancer just didn't have the final word with me. So I don't want to just, I didn't give up. I'm not a quitter. I never give up. I'm not just alive, but today I'm living. I wake up each day with more gratitude, more faith, more fire in my soul, because we're not defined by what tried to destroy us. We're defined by what we overcame. So today, I speak life, I speak strength, and I speak hope. And I remind you, your life matters. So I always encourage, the men that I speak with, and I have them say it with me, 50 plus, testing is a must. And I have them repeat that, 50 plus, testing is a must. So this is the story, through my surgery, through a lot of the other things that was required of me to be healthy and strong. So I believe I'm in the right place, that I've done all I was asked to do. I'm healthy, I'm strong. and I'm able to share my experiences. So that's just a short version. A lot of this is, yeah, I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm willing to answer any questions that yeah, may come later.
Billy, thank you so much for sharing your truth with us. It was such a powerful reminder of the strength it takes to face this disease and how important it is to have a voice and support system along the process, but also to use that voice to encourage others and those around them to seek the necessary screening, as well as having those conversations with their providers. And so now I'm going to bring back Dr. Hwang for our conversation. And if folks have attended previous fireside chats, they know that it is not a fireside chat Q&A without getting our fire started. I'm going to go ahead and share that. So now, folks, this is your time. If you haven't submitted any questions, please submit to the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be addressing questions, as many as we can, in the time that we have remaining. So please use the Q&A feature to get your questions submitted. So I'll kick things off. As you mentioned, Billy, and also Dr. Hwang, you kind of alluded to this too, but we've seen in the data that the outcomes for prostate cancer, as well as the diagnosis, aren't the same across all communities. And for example, as Billy mentioned, Black men in the US are more likely to be diagnosed and at later stages and face higher mortality rates. So Dr. Hwang, this question is for you, but what role can research like genomic testing and new therapies play in helping to close those gaps?
I think this is a wonderful question, and Billy, thank you for really pointing all these issues out. Part of our lab, we don't broadly broadcast this, is really driven by understanding these differences. In part, for example, not only is there discrepancy between when they get diagnosed, we also notice that certain communities are also opting against testing, diagnostic testing that might help them understand their genomics. For whatever reason, we have investigators that are trying to help understand why certain communities are, how should I put this? They don't appreciate testing as much as the white community. With that said, I'm just going to put it out there. For example, in some of our test data, we're finding a very minor fraction, including my own sort of race and Asian population, being somewhat resistant to testing. So I think, the genomic testing will help us get answers to what type of therapies to use. But really, I think one of some of the bigger questions are related to why are certain patient populations willing to get tested? And then once we start studying their data, especially in such local populations, we might be able to come up with better answers. So really, I think it's not just really doing molecular research, et cetera. Part of our team is really thinking about community engagement to solve these issues. I think it's very important. If we don't do that, we'll never be able to strike a balance and sort of personalized therapy. I think that's a wonderful question.
Thank you, Dr. Hwang. Billy, as a Black man who's navigated this diagnosis, what do you think needs to change so that more men in your community are getting diagnosed earlier and getting the care that they deserve?
Stepping up. I think men in the community need to hear the severity of why testing is needed, and the results if you don't get tested. Because I've come across a lot of men in my community. They're 60 plus years old, and they say, "Hey, I just got tested for prostate cancer, and I'm at a stage 4." This isn't the stage that you want to jump and react. You want to do this early on. This is why testing early is a great preventative measure so that we can see this. So it has to be brought out in our community. Hey, testing at 45, you get to stay alive. 50 plus, testing is a must. So I take this story that I have and it's embedded in my mind, and I can take it in the community as I walk, as I live at the Walmart, wherever is necessary that I need to bring this word, because it's not broadcasted for us to do this. So we don't see a sense of normalcy of going to get this to happen because it's almost suppressed. to bring this information to the demographic that needs it most. It seems that this is why it's not getting out. So I have to be the one to step up. It has to be me to get out and share this information and share my experiences. So being out in the community and being that voice and being that sense of hope is what drives me, and what I think in the community will help others, because sometimes they believe what they see and what they hear. So if we can show them this is what it looks like to be cancer free, and you know, and you can see that, hey, I'm a regular normal person. You can get this test and you can be fine as well. So they have to see it sometimes in the community in order to take action. So I think we need to spread the word better. If it's billboards up, hey, 50 plus testing is a must. Prostate cancer, UFM. I don't
I
know. We
love
have to
that.
get the word out.
50 plus testing is a must. That is such a catchphrase. But it's really important that, you know, that folks are understanding that these are what the guidelines are. But also, you brought up a really good point of having these conversations early. If you know that you have a family history, start the conversations with your doctors early about testing for PSA before age 50. But I love that catchphrase. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Billy. So this question is actually for you, Billy. And so how do you, and you mentioned this, right? So once you catch cancer at stage 4, but how do you support a loved one in stage 4 when treatment, some of the most high impact treatments are no longer an option? What tips do you have for this person?
Motivation. You know, we want to let them know that I understand, you know, that continue whatever treatment that is given, because it will prolong life. So don't be discouraged because you at this high stage and it looks bleak and but continue the treatment that your doctor gave you. Come to some meetings to see others who have had this diagnosis and are still around after so many years, when they, you know, it was projected that you wouldn't. And I always say mnpcc.org, that is the Minnesota Prostate Cancer Coalition group that can get inside some of the details. Again, some of it's graphic, which I'm okay with that, because sometimes you need to hear a raw version of this disease that we have, and how we can make an aggressive approach into dealing with it, and not just because it's a later stage. Oh, I'm at a point of no return. No, you're still here with us. So as long as you're still here with us, I want to motivate, encourage, and drop and pay visits to them who do have that. There's a guy in my church at a stage 4, and I talk to him every day. He's encouraged and he loves to see me because I'm sharing my story willingly. So, yeah, I think that's kind of how I would approach that.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Billy. So Billy, you said you're open to being honest and open about some of your experiences. So this person just asked a question about how common is incontinence after prostate surgery to remove the prostate. Did you experience that? And maybe Dr. Hwang, if you have any insights about how common it is after surgery.
Can you repeat that? You said how common it is after surgeries to
incontinence?
You know, you have to do Kegels. I mean, there's an exercise that you have to do in order for you to stay strong and to build back to a sense of normalcy. And a lack thereof, yeah, you're going to be peeing on yourself. You want to do these exercises. You want to rebuild, you know, this muscle after that, you know, so that you can get back to a sense of normalcy. Yeah, I had to wear diapers, then I had to wear the other pad, and then you know, but that process was what I needed for me to get to where I'm at. I won't be leaking, so I won't be doing this. So I'm a Kegel expert. I mean, I'm doing them as we speak, but it's going to take diligence to continue to do these things, because it will build and it will get better. But there's steps you have to take to do that. And you know, the other part, you know, again, it's great if you have a partner that's working with you with that. But you know, if you don't have a partner that you talk to and deal with, yeah, you have to go to meetings. You have to understand that this is a process, and you're going to get through it. As far as the the other stuff connected with it, and a normal erection or whatever, you may want to look at it, it is still a process. And if there's like a huge problem, then you let your doctor know, and he can give you some things that will assist you in getting back to a sense of normalcy. But following through whatever the regimen or whatever the doctors say do, I think that'll be really, really important, and you don't deviate from it.
Thank you for that, Billy. Dr. Hwang, do you have anything to add about maybe the statistics around that?
I unfortunately not sure about the exact statistics, but I like what Billy had mentioned in the prior question, in the sense that this is why screening is important, right? Because there are some prostate tumors, especially localized, we don't have to conduct very serious surgery, really. So that kind of reflects a need to do sort of early testing, and that really supports Billy's point. So if we're worried about this consequence, early testing may help a certain population out.
All right, so there is another question, and this question is for you, Dr. Hwang. Kind of some of the things that you brought up around the trust in some communities and not wanting to seek genomic testing. So and you said there's some research that's going into that, but how do we bridge some of the trust issues that these communities are experiencing with the medical community when it's PSA testing, but also with genomic testing as well?
Yeah, this is a very complex question. I wish I had a better answer. I have fully confessed that this research project has really just started about a couple years ago, when we started realizing that probably out of all the patients that we have in this particular, at least tested, at least in a certain population, really probably less than 5% were non-white, which was really surprising to me. So some of the odd thing is, everybody in my laboratory is we're very diverse here. So it just felt really off. But I would say this, the work starts by, first of all, just looking at the bigger patient population. So now we're starting to look at all the patient populations that have visited the clinic over the last 20 years. We're trying to figure out when, for example, how often, really real statistics, we're trying to build real data from our patients over the last 15 years to see why certain population, to be double sure about these statistics and comparing it to certain national averages. Surprisingly, this research has not been done a lot across the United States. One of the efforts, a young African-American lady in our laboratory, she's really leading this efforts to meet with community leaders, perhaps like Billy, really to think about how can we actually spread this message, so it's not just about early stage sort of testing a PSA, but also, hey, if you have cancer, there might be some information that we might be able to help you out with using some of this testing. Do want to just share right now that some of the genomic testing will lead to very effective therapies right now. The FDA has approved certain sort of therapies that are directly related to specific genomic aberrations. So there are actually treatments for patients with very advanced disease that actually work in a substantial population of patients, but they do require genomic and genetic testing. I'll stop there because there's a big subject.
Well, thank you for that. And Billy, do you have anything to add about how we can bridge the trust issues with Black men and some communities of color and the medical community to seek PSA testing?
Again, we need to hold these forums, because it's been years and years and years that it's been suppressed, and that it's not good for men to go to the hospital. If it ain't this, you don't need to go to the hospital. If it ain't that, we need to change the narrative because of the severity of this issue today, 2025. We need to get out, and we need to be spokesmen of those who have lived experience, and even some of the doctors in the community. Hey, this is important. Again, put the billboards up. It needs to be seen that this is important. We need to have a voice. I know we got the other things for prostate cancer, but it's the big picture. We need that raw picture. Say, hey, this is important. We need this done, regardless of what your uncle told you, your granddad and them told you. Need to be tested. It's important because the fatality rate is going up. So we don't want the guy 62 years old. Hey, today I got tested for prostate cancer and it's a stage 4. He needed to hear this message a long time ago. At least we want to plant the seed, and then it's up to the individual to water it and, fertilize it and give it sunshine for it to grow, for you to take the action. But if there's no seeds being planted on the importance of getting this out, not just to Black men, because most men don't want to go to the hospital. Their mates have to push them. Honey, you're going to the hospital. If I got to handcuff you and take you to go. So the information is not necessarily just for men, but it can be for the wives. It can be for the spouses, even the children's. Daddy, you know you need to go to the. So we need to get the word out to encourage men to do this. And it's not pulling teeth. It's saving lives.
And so, Billy, there's so many questions, so keep them coming, please. But Billy, there's a specific question for you in here. One, appreciation for sharing your stories, but wanting to hear more about how you, so what helped you overcome some of your fear of your diagnosis, and then also what tips you can share with other men who are facing a similar diagnosis and may be fearful.
What helped me with my fear, I watched my father die. I watched his 7 brothers die when they were so strong, they're men. But at that final stage, they cried like a 12-year-old child. So I was motivated then. I'm like, I don't want to go through that. I knew historically what they went through, but I knew it was inevitable that I was going to get that call. It's your turn. So I knew I wanted to stop that long history of the men in my family not going. I wanted to trailblaze a new way, for the men under me, my nephews and others. I want them to know it's okay to go. So just seeing what it has done to my family has encouraged me when the phone call came to me, and after the surgery, moving forward to share the message that, look, it's okay. I've seen it. I've seen what it do to people, but look at me. When you can show a finished product, so to speak. Hey, I went through it. Now I'm sharing a message. That's how I want to encourage. Showing and sharing, showing and sharing. And what was the second part of that question?
Well, what tips would you have for somebody who is experiencing a cancer diagnosis and is fearful? So how would you encourage them?
Look into it. Look into your options. I chose the Da Vinci surgery because the men in my family had the radiation and the other form of treatment, dialysis, I think. It didn't work. It worked for 40 years, but the 41st year on one of my uncles, it came back and it didn't last him months. But options, we want to discuss options. With the surgery, there are certain things that you're going to lose, and for the other radiation, there's other sacrifices with that too. But we want to make sure they're made aware of the options. I was given time to, hey, you got 6 months, you can wait and make the decision. But my family was already in my head and I watched their suffering. So I didn't give myself 6 months. I gave myself the better option that I thought was great for me, but to give options and encouragement, and that you've been tested, you got it at a really good stage. It's not at a final designation point yet. So, giving them options, and encouragement that to look into. Me, I made mine very quickly because I knew what the end result may have been. So I'm happy with the choice I made, but giving options and letting them read about it, look on the internet, get advice from the doctor, those kind of things that I would like to encourage.
It's so good, and I'm so sorry we're gonna have to wrap it up. This is so good, and we could continue this conversation for much longer. So apologies in advance for everyone who submitted a question that we could not get to, but to close this out, I'm just gonna ask you both one final question. So what is one key message? I know we've heard some really good key messages, but one final key message that you'd like our audience to take away from today's conversation. Dr. Hwang?
There's a lot of hope out there, but we have to, kind of like what Billy mentioned, be involved and share this hope and honestly be part of this community.
And Billy?
My word, 50 plus, testing is a must.
I love that. What a good way to wrap this all up. Well, folks, we are out of time, so we're gonna close out today's fireside chat. And I want to sincerely thank our speakers, Dr. Hwang and Billy, for their time, their wisdom, all of the work and effort that they are putting into closing the gaps that we see in prostate cancer, but also eventually towards hope in treating this disease. And so these conversations are also possible with our attendees. So folks like you, thank you so much for being a part of the dialogue, for engaging. And we really appreciate it. So we hope to see you at some of our future and upcoming fireside chats. But with that, I'll just conclude with a few final announcements. We would love your feedback. So at the end of this session, a brief survey will auto-populate on your screen. Please take a few moments to complete it because your responses truly help us improve future fireside chats. And after submitting the survey, you can enter a drawing to win a prize pack filled with goodies from the Masonic Cancer Center. The link to enter the drawing will be accessible after you submit the survey. And mark your calendar for our next virtual fireside chat on October 15th, same time, same place. In honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October, we are going to be focusing on triple negative breast cancer. It's actually one of the most aggressive forms of breast cancer. And so we have insights from a leading researcher at the Masonic Cancer Center who will give us an overview of some of the research at the university. And then you'll also hear from a survivor who will share their personal story. And finally, please follow the Masonic Cancer Center on all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on future announcements and events from the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement. Until next time, everyone, take care. And thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. Bye, everyone.